Number 5. The Allagash Abduction. Our first tale is known as the Allagash Abduction. And by the way, what a turn of a phrase. That sounds like a great airplane book. Named after the Allagash Waterway in Maine, where it took place. In 1976, a group of 4 friends, who'd all met in college, were taking a trip camping, canoeing, and relaxing. The trip would be a trip they would never forget, and not just because of the salmon. The men, twin brothers Jack and Jim, and friends Chuck and Charlie, all decided to go out fishing on the lake at night. Before setting off, though, they made sure to light a large campfire to act as a visible landmark from the water. Now, the evening transpired fairly normally, fishing, sharing stories, until the men saw a blinding light in the sky above them. A glowing orb that shone brighter than any light any of the men had ever seen, flashing all sorts of bright, radiant colors. Now, the object was hard to make out, but it looked to be about 80 meters in diameter, and was slowly approaching the fishing boat. The men hurriedly panicked and paddled back to the shoreline, only to discover that the campfire they had been lit had been completely smoldered and looked to have been put out hours and hours ago, despite the men having not been out nearly that long. Stranger still, a few days after the trip, the men all started reporting similar nightmares, seeing a silver operating room and long, tall, giant-headed creatures examining them in this room, taking samples of their blood, their skin, and so on. All of them described the room, the creatures, and the nightmares extremely similarly. The men underwent psychiatric evaluation and were all deemed mentally stable, even passing polygraph tests. So what happened? Could this have been a mass hallucination? Or were these men plucked by visitors from another world for study? And if you love UFO stories and alien abduction stories, we've got plenty more where that came from at Top 5 Scary. So toss a subscribe and keep on creeping on.
Number 4. Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945. The US's first nuclear explosion. 1946. 1946. First underwater nuclear explosion. 1947. The first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement, and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here.
Number 3. The 1979 Spain sighting. Another Reddit thread asking a similar question asked users to share their stories of famous UFO and alien sightings from their country, bringing us this story from Spain that took place in November 1979. A plane took off from Mallorca, coming from Austria and heading to Tenerife. Not long after, it found red lights in the sky hovering ahead of it. Now, initially the pilots assumed it was just another plane. The flight crew tried to signal over the radio to find out what was on their flight path, but neither the air traffic controller in Barcelona nor the military radar had any idea what it was they had encountered, as nothing else should have been sharing the airspace with them at this time. The plane ascended, hoping to avoid the flight path of the UFO, and to try and get a look to ascertain just what they were flying up with. The UFO kept getting closer and closer, so the pilots did an emergency landing in Valencia. The UFO had a similar idea and followed them around till it landed. The original plane's radar started to pick up 3 objects flying behind them. The military had sent out 2 planes to try and assess and contain the situation. They found a giant red light floating statically over the airport, even though it wasn't being picked up on by the radar. The light started to fly when they got closer as they attempted to chase it, soaring around, tailing the mysterious floating light for upwards of 2 hours, intermittently losing sight of the target completely, occasionally getting blips on the radar, until eventually the trail went cold, and as quickly as it had appeared, the strange light had disappeared. People on the ground reported seeing that light all over that day, and to date, no one truly knows what had happened. Number 2. The Travis Walton incident. Now, our next story is a wild one even by top 5 standards, but that's exactly why I wanted to include it. Our story starts in November 1975, and I'm pretty sure that's the third one of these that took place in November. It's a weird month for aliens, huh? Travis Walton was working as a forester, and the day was passing normally. Walton and his co-workers from the logging crew were riding in a truck, 7 men total, when they encountered a flying saucer-like object hovering above them around 100 feet in the air, making a loud, high-pitched droning noise. The truck stopped, and Walton left the vehicle to get a closer look at the unidentified flying object. And suddenly, a bright light surrounded the truck and knocked Walton back and unconscious. Terrified, the other men drove off. Walton then goes on to claim that when he awoke, he was no longer in the forest on the ground, but was in a bright, silvery, hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. Very similar to the Allagash Abduction story. He says that he struggled as much as he could against his captors until he was met with a tall creature that closely resembled a human, but was wearing an intimidating helmet. The masked creature escorted Walton to another room and put a translucent mask over his face, and he blacked out. Walton says the next thing he can accurately remember is walking alongside a highway 5 days later. The thing is, Walton really was missing for 5 days. There was a search. Scent dogs and helicopters were used to track him over the woods, and he was assumed to have passed. For 5 full days, he was completely untraceable until one day he just reappeared. Since that fateful week in 1975, Travis has sworn that what happened to him was an abduction, even if it just seemed like a bad dream. His story served as the basis for the 90s horror film Fire Fell from the Sky, so if you're looking for a dramatization of this story, good one to check out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Incident. It's sometimes referred to as Great Britain's Roswell. The Rendlesham Incident is a very noticeable case in UFO sighting history. On December 26, 1980, there was a series of vivid, bright, flashing lights flying over Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. 2 U.S. Army personnel, John Burroughs and Jim Penniston, were stationed at local Air Force bases and were alerted by these strange lights, worrying that it could have been a threat. The younger of the 2 men, Mr. Burroughs, said that the lights looked like a beacon flashing all sorts of colors. Over 40 personnel stationed at the Air Force base corroborated this claim. The 2 men got clearance to investigate whatever was flashing over Rendlesham Forest. In their official document to their superiors, the 2 men write that they saw a strange, glowing, metallic triangular object hanging in the sky, pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men had any idea what it was they were witnessing. The craft seemed far more advanced than anything either of them had ever seen, and seemed not of this world. As if that wasn't compelling evidence enough, neighboring farm animals were all in a frenzy as this thing was flying, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning. The personnel could no longer use their radio to contact the base. Landing in the middle of the clearing in the forest was a craft unlike either of them had ever seen. It was black, triangular, and made out of smooth, opaque glass. No windows or landing gear. It didn't look like anything either of these trained servicemen had ever seen. Penniston describes there being hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the shell of the vessel, although they were far too cryptic for him to understand. The craft took off, changing the lives of those men together. And it wouldn't even be the last sighting of the Rendlesham UFO, because not even 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen flying overhead the forest again. This time, coming prepared, crews set out with Geiger counters to follow up on whatever was flying around them. The patrol found their way to the landing site Penniston and Burroughs had described and found several depressions in the ground, all setting off the Geiger counter for radioactivity. And lo and behold, above them was those same flashing lights that had been taunting them 2 nights before, disappearing into the skies. 40 years later, and we're still no closer to understanding what happened in the Rendlesham incident. Number 5. TickTock sighting. Our first entry on this list comes to us from a very reputable source, TickTock. TickTock user Drillabang, who posted this video recently online. The caption, "We caught them out there," is almost Mulder's catchphrase of "the truth is out there." Almost. And it seems like they are. The video shows a short clip of someone filming the sky and clouds, and passing through the clouds slowly is something. It's kind of hard to tell. It's an unidentified flying object. A small black being with what looks like tentacles protruding from it, like a little black jellyfish. The entity is moving slowly through the sky, with what looks like an electrical field following all around it. The being appears to be electrical, possibly a small mechanical drone. My first thought looking at one of these things is just how much this thing looks like the Sentinels from the Matrix. Could very well be evidence of the simulation leaking through. This clip is undeniably pretty odd. It's hard to make out just how big this flying entity is, although it does look a little bit small, but really it's hard to tell. Is it a spacecraft? Is it a living being but biomechanical? Is it a drone? Of course, it has to be said, the clip, as impressive as it is, could very well be a high production hoax. Like I said, the thing really does look a little too perfect for me, and it looks a lot like one of those Matrix Sentinels. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if it's a shrunken down 3D model of it used for the video. But real or fake, you can't deny that the video is captivating and has people talking. Oh, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments about this one if you think this has you convinced. And hey, while I've got you here listening, you want to see a whole lot more spooky stuff this month? Well, I got news for you, pal. I got boxes full of spooky stuff. Subscribe for a fresh fright in your inbox delivered daily. Number 4, the mysterious man. Our next story comes to us from the internet's campfire, Reddit. A thread was posted asking abductees, or people who've got an abduction story to share their experience. Now the whole thing is really a highlight, but this one stood out for me. Take a listen, because this anonymous Redditor shared a truly unforgettable, strange experience. He was living in Washington at the time, and he and his friends were really big stargazers. One Thanksgiving, he got invited to stay with his friend's family. So they all went out to go do some stargazing, went out to a big field of knee-high grass, and were staring up at what they thought was a bunch of shooting stars. The original poster asked his friend what the light was, but he said he had no idea. The light was bobbing around, bouncing wildly in the sky like a pinball. Then all of a sudden, it fizzled out. Puzzled, but not disturbed, the friends continued on with their night, walking through the field, wondering what they'd seen, even joking that maybe it was a UFO, but assuming it must have been a drone or something. And then it gets weird. They came across a young man standing alone in the field. They were the only people there for miles around, and the poster said he would have been able to see him from where he was. So he said it was almost as if he appeared in front of them. He was wearing only ratty jeans and nothing else. It was the middle of November, so the attire was particularly odd. Now the friends were scared to approach him, but OP felt necessary to go forward. He said he didn't sound drunk, but that he did seem visibly stirred. He asked the strange man what had happened, and he said he did not want to talk about it, but he needed to be examined at a hospital immediately. The Redditor gave the man his jacket and saw him into an ambulance, where he was then taken off to a hospital. What happened? Was this man an abductee who'd been dropped off? Was the light they saw flooding around him being beamed down? We may never know. Number 3, the Ring of Light. Another entry coming to us fresh from Reddit, posted by user Jesse Zell. A short clip that shows us something incredibly bizarre. The clip is captioned appropriately, "The most unexplained thing I have ever seen in my life," and I'm strongly inclined to agree. Take a little look-see. In the clip, we get a pretty good shot at a suburban house and the overcast night sky above. A little bit above the house, there appears to be a ring of light that appears, circling around, appearing a few lights at a time, rounding the house a few times. That's bizarre. Even the skeptics should buy into this one. I mean, it's easy to just imagine a flying saucer hovering a little bit out of view atop the clouds, descending its undercarriage lights on the neighborhood. A user in the comments proposed that it could just be nothing more than a series of spotlights. But the original poster and uploader of the video insists that from where they were standing, the lights are appearing above the clouds, not below them. And even then, what explains the perfectly circular pattern displayed? The user goes on to say that there was no particularly loud noises emanating from around the skies, and it was very hard to make out what was happening. They go on to add that they're very familiar with drones and have drones flying around their home with some regularity. I'm hoping they mean just a neighbor or an enthusiast and not that they're being watched. And that they would recognize a drone if there was one, and that they are certain these lights were not caused by drones. So just what is causing it? What was it? Is this Reddit user being observed by someone from the stars? Are they potentially a target for an abduction? We eagerly await a follow-up on this one. Number 2, the Cube. Posted to YouTube by user, well, fittingly named, Is This a UFO? This brief 20-second clip showcases a pilot filming from inside the cockpit. Also, side note before I start talking about all the alien stuff, is that safe? Are you allowed to be doing that? I guess the plane doesn't crash in the video, so I'll take their word for it. Anyway, the clip is really short and sweet. We see from the window that there's a small cuboid-like shape blasting through the sky. The footage is extremely clear, unlike most UFO footage, and it's really easy to see what's happening, although it doesn't help matters much or provide you with any clear answers. What we can see is a small black cube propelling itself forward. There's no trail of smoke, No lights flashing, just a small black cube flying around. So what is that? Some comments in the video suggest that it could be a weather balloon or a helium balloon, although I gotta say the altitude is a bit questionable, or why it's traveling horizontally so fast. Its travel in the video does seem a bit pointed and intentional, like it's trying to get somewhere, although that could just be me wanting to apply sentient traits for it because I badly want to believe. Interestingly though, in 2014, a report from a 10-year Navy pilot veteran, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that in his service, he would see UFOs nigh daily and would report them constantly, only to have his reports ignored. Interesting. He said in his time in the service, he'd see unexplainable objects flying by him at hypersonic speeds with no trails, no exhaust, often 30,000 feet up in the air undetected by his radar. He said one of the more consistent things that he would see was an object that looked like a sphere encased in a cube. Kinda sounds a bit like the cube propelling itself forward in this clip, doesn't it? Fascinatingly, after this report from Graves, the Navy announced it would be changing the way it handled UFO reports internally. Perhaps there's something they know and they're not telling us. Number 1, the laser pointer. And finally, we're down to our number 1 clip. Now this is my favorite clip of the bunch, by far. I mean, I would hope so, otherwise why would I bother putting it at the number 1 spot? This clip also comes to us from Reddit from user Luke511, filming above him what appears to be a ball of light bouncing around bizarrely in the sky. A UFO if I've ever seen one. Luke, who when faced with the dangers of the unknown, the wonders of the cosmos, possibly standing on a chance to make that fabled first contact with another civilization with unknown frontiers, stood proudly and takes a laser pointer out and starts flashing it upwards to the sky. Now I have nothing but respect for this absolute madman who got right down to brass tacks. Because him flashing that laser pointer made this video go from, oh, maybe that's a UFO, to, oh, that is definitely a spacecraft being piloted by an intelligent being. In the video, as soon as you see him flashing it around, the vehicle maneuvers on a dime, trying clearly to avoid the laser, which is pretty damning. Now the reason I love this clip so much, besides the fact that I do think it's pretty concrete evidence, assume these really are aliens flying around in that spacecraft. Imagine you're coming down to a new planet and you see a green beam coming from the ground pointing directly at you. Do you think they were freaking out? Do you think they were losing their minds, panicking that they got made? That laser was gonna come for them and destroy them? Or do you think it was more like a kitten situation? Like they saw the laser and got distracted by a really enticing game of intergalactic chase? Luke511, this has gotta be a top moment for humanity and for you as a whole. Tagging a UFO with a laser beam and potentially scaring alien life has got to be a landmark moment for us as a species. My only concern is that maybe this event might have sent intergalactic relations back just a little bit. I'm hoping aliens aren't afraid to visit the planet now because of the danger of green lights. We'll turn them off, we promise. We're sorry, it was just a little prank.
Number 5, Al Warden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Warden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Warden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Warden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Warden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, why should we keep going back to the moon? He paused and replied, survival. Survival of our species. Warden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front, end quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring.
Number 4, Chilean UFO. Our next entry was posted to Reddit on r/aliens. I mean, where else are you gonna find alien clips? The video posted is filmed from a mountain in Chile, where a group of friends on a hike found something amazing in the sky and luckily had their phones on them to record it. This entity floating around them doesn't really look like your traditional UFO sightings. It looks like a ball of pure energy just hovering above them in a triangular shape, looking like distilled pure light or just some photons or something. Looking around in the background, you can see there's nothing around them. No airports, no mysterious army bases nearby, just a big mountain range and a bizarre glowing ball of light hovering around aimlessly. A user on Reddit offered a rudimentary translation of the friends talking, which adds a little bit of insight to the clip. We can hear the friends joking that it could be a spirit bomb from Goku and there's going to be an epic duel soon. Goku is technically an alien, so I guess if Goku was real and you saw him flying around in the Nimbus cloud, that would qualify for a UFO sighting. They go on to joke that it looks like something out of the movie Independence Day. It's really hard to say just what this thing is. Now, usually I tend to roll a little bit more Scully than Mulder, and I'm naturally a bit skeptic, but I am completely out of ideas looking at this thing. The edges of the triangle are so very visible, and it doesn't really seem like it follows any one particular flight pattern. I can't take even the slightest guess what this might be, so your guess is just as good as mine, my ghouls and goblins. Take a look for yourself, and decide for yourself what the answer is.
Number 3. Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a U.S. Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? What school, sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Warden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in aeronautical engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it. And it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window." So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck." Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, U.S. Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, He qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right?